Today we're talking about 5.1 angles of triangles. So for this, we're just going to be looking at like the different, we're going to be looking at interior angles, exterior angles, and being able to classify triangles by their sides and by their angles. Okay, so let's zoom in and look at each of these. All right, so an interior angle is simply an angle that's on the inside of the triangle. So if you think of the word interior, it just means inside, right? So all these little highlighted angles here, remember an angle is simply the corner where two lines or two rays form a corner, right? So this is an angle, this one, and these are the interior ones, they're inside. Whereas an exterior angle is on the outside and it's formed by one side of the triangle and the extension of an adjacent side of the triangle. Remember, adjacent is right next to it. Okay, so for example, angle 3 here, I'll zoom in a little bit more. Angle 3 here is formed by this side of the triangle and then taking this side and extending it out. So that's the exterior. And then same with angle 4. It's formed by this side and extending this side. An exterior angle is not the one where the points point to. That does not make a exterior angle. Or if you think about it like your interior ones, the ones that are vertical with the interior, that is not exterior. They've got to be on the sides. Okay. And then corollary to a theorem, so a theorem that follows on from another theorem. Okay, so it's basically one that builds upon itself. All right, with that being said, let's look at classifying triangles by their sides. So the first triangle we have is a scalene triangle. That means that none of the sides are congruent with each other. Remember, congruent just simply means equal or the same, right? So none of these are the same as each other. Okay. Whereas isosceles has two sides that are congruent. Okay. This is going to be really cheesy. But if you think about isosceles, if you break it out and say I saw Celise, you use two eyes to see Celise. So two congruent sides make up an isosceles triangles. Two congruent sides. Remember, these little tick marks just mean congruent. So this side and this side are congruent. And then equilateral, if you think of the word equal, all three sides are equal or congruent. All of them are congruent with each other. All right, and then classifying a triangle by its angles. So an acute triangle has 3 acute angles. That means all 3 angles are less than 90 degrees. Okay, you can see that they don't even make a right angle. They're less than a right angle. A right triangle obviously has one right angle in it. We see it there. An obtuse triangle, remember an obtuse angle is one that's greater than 90 degrees. So we see this angle here is larger than the 90 degrees. It opens up more than 90. So if we have at least one obtuse angle, it's an obtuse triangle. And then equiangular, think about the same thing as equilateral. It means equal. All 3 of these angles are equal with each other. And remember, these little curves just mean that the angles are congruent one with another. Okay? So, and the deal is if it's equilateral, it's also going to be equiangular. These two go together. All right, so let's do some examples. So let's classify the triangles by its sides and by its angles. So we see here, looking at the sides, I have 2 congruent sides, okay? And remember, those 2 congruent sides, 2 eyes to see Celise, so it's going to be isosceles. And then when we look at the angles, and all of these are all less than 90. They're smaller than a 90-degree angle. So these are simply going to be an acute triangle. If you want to put a face on it, just for fun. Okay. All right, next one. When I look at the 3 sides, none of them are congruent with each other. So if none of them are congruent, then this is going to be a scalene triangle when I classify it by its sides. Remember, you're looking at these 2 sections by the sides, so you have to pick one from here and then one from by the angles. And so then I look at the angles, and this one here is larger. It's opened up more than a 90, so it's an obtuse one. It's an obtuse triangle. So it's at scalene and obtuse. Then the last one, when we look at the sides, I have 1, 2, 3 congruent sides. So that's going to be equilateral. So remember, we just looked up here at 3 congruent sides, equilateral. And if it's equilateral, it's going to be equiangular. And we can tell that because we have 3 congruent angles. Those little curves mean that they're congruent. So it's also going to be equiangular. So next one. So once again, we look at the sides here. None of the sides are congruent. Never assume that those sides are congruent with each other. They either have to have a tick mark or they have to have like the same number on the side. So none of these are congruent. So this is going to be a scalene when we look at the sides. Then we have to look at the angles. And if you look, we have one angle that's 100 degrees. If it's 90, or if it's above 90, it's obtuse. So this is an obtuse angle, which makes it an obtuse triangle. All right, same thing on the next one. None of the sides are congruent, so once again, it's going to be scalene. And then if we look, we have a right angle, which makes it a right triangle. And then the last one, I have 2 congruent sides, which makes it isosceles. And then I have 2 congruent angles, but that doesn't get me anywhere. You've got to have all 3. None of them, it's not obtuse, because none of them are larger than 90. But if I look, every one of them are smaller than 90. They're inside of 90 degrees. So this is going to be an acute triangle. And that's it.